Hi everyone, it's Jeff here. I wanted to do a little review of the conservation projects that we've been doing at Brimwood Farm over the past couple of years, and also talk about some of the things that are coming up in 2017. So if you want to find out about our Wildflower Meadow, the Bluebell Grove, the owl boxes, the biodiversity chart and everything like that, then stay tuned because it's all coming up next. Well, first up, I'm just going to say this might be quite a long video because there's quite a lot of things to cover and I get quite excited about all these conservation projects. So I will try and keep my rambling to a minimum, but also if you look in the description, I'm going to put some timestamps so you can skip forward through different projects if there's one you don't want to watch or anything. So anybody that's been watching this YouTube channel for a while will know that most of the work that I currently do is in the back garden. It's just a normal suburban garden and I'm trying to cram in as much as possible. But we also have around 40 acres of farmland that's been inherited through the generations. So my great-grandfather bought it in the early 1900s and it's been farmed ever since, although my father decided to become a vicar instead, so it's been used by tenanting farmers at the moment. And our plan is to move there eventually and have a small holding. However, it's 2.5 hours away, so there's no way we can currently keep livestock up there, and we can't really even grow crops, you know, veggies and things, because it's just too far away to do the maintenance work. So that leaves us with one thing, and that's conservation. It is a beautiful area of Britain, and it's kind of a bubble surrounded by modern farming practices in that all the hedges from surrounding fields have been stripped out and it's been kind of made into large wastelands of open fields. Whereas ours is the traditional farmland with smaller fields that are segmented by hedges. There's some coppicing, there's a pit, there are a couple of ponds, and the tenant farmer already says there's tons of wildlife there, and there is, because when we go up, and as you've seen in videos, there's barn owls and pheasants and rabbits and hares and deer, and there's all sorts of things. So our plan over the next few years, before we can actually move up there and apply for planning permission, is to boost the biodiversity of the area as much as we can, and we're doing that with a range of conservation projects. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the Wildflower Meadow. So the Wildflower Meadow was started in 2014. Now we're on a tight budget here, so we can't financially afford to put a lot in other than our time and our effort. So we crowdfunded just over £500 for the Wildflower Meadow seed, and the company that gave us the Wildflower Meadow actually shoved in a bit more, which was really nice of them. And we were working again with a plot that wasn't ideal. You know, you often see these things where they're talking about you know, planting a tree or planting a wildflower meadow in a perfect circumstance. Ours is not a perfect circumstance by any means. The soil is really clay. The field gets quite wet. The field had also been tilled for a lot of time by farming practices. So the soil fertility was low, which is good for wildflowers, but it wasn't tilled down to a fine soil. So you've got really clay soil, and it's really undulating as well. So it wasn't the perfect place to sow a wildflower meadow. You know, it wasn't flat, we couldn't just rake everything out. We don't have a tractor to go and do it all, so it's all done by hand. So we went up with a team of, I call them my little minions, my work team, and we sowed this wildflower meadow in the spring of 2014. And when we got there, although oilseed rape hadn't been growing that year, the seeds had already started coming up from what had been left over, and so you can see in the pictures there's tons of oilseed rape, and I was a bit worried about how that might play out over the coming years, but as you'll see it's actually died out and it's been fine. So that was the start of the Wildflower Meadow, and then unfortunately we sowed the seeds and then there was no rain. So we're battling dryness, clay soil, flocks of wood pigeons, and it was a bit of a nightmare. And when I came later that year, I was a little disheartened because it didn't seem to have worked out how I wanted it. It wasn't this beautiful meadow, how you always picture, how everybody says it's going to be. It wasn't that at all. But come 2015, and we went down, and I went through the the hedgerow thinking, oh, it's going to be amazing, and I was immediately disappointed. But on closer inspection, you'll see in these photos that there are tons of perennial plants, perennial wildflower meadows plants that started growing. Now I think a lot of the annuals didn't take because there was no rain, and I think a lot of the wood pigeons came down and ate the seed. Now that is one area where the undulating soil was good, because I think a lot of the seeds fell into the cracks and managed to escape being eaten. But the perennial ones have really taken off. So there's lots of plantain and oxeye daisy and thistles and beautiful plants like that are all coming up and starting to mesh together. Now the one thing that we were happy with is this field hasn't got any grass in it at the moment, so the grass will creep in from the edges. It hasn't got grass in there at the moment, so there's no competition for the wildflowers. They can just grow freely, and then as the grass starts to come in, then we'll have to start sprinkling some golden rattle, which is a parasitic plant on grass roots, to keep that grass at bay. And then finally in 2016, so this is the second growing year per se, and it really is starting to take off. So we've got the wildflowers, and the oxeye daisies have completely taken over. As you can see in these pictures, they've really done well. And now it's just a case of scything the land every year, scything it back in the fall, taking off all that top dressing and the dead stuff so we don't increase the soil fertility. Now, as we've been scything and as we've been in the forest, we know that it's working because we've seen rodents there, we've seen tons of bugs, we've found deer droppings, so we know there is a deer there, and there's a nesting pair of buzzards in the woodland next to it. So there's obviously prey for the buzzards and these birds of prey. So the Wildflower Meadow is a thumbs up, and that is something that's really worked well. Now our second project has been the Bluebell Grove. Again, I wanted to plant an English Bluebell Grove because we're all too familiar with the fact that Spanish bluebells are taking over and they outcompete the English bluebell, and they also hybridize with them and create these hybridized non-perfumed bluebells. So I wanted an English bluebell wood. So again, I think it was 2014 in the autumn we planted 100 bluebells. I got really, really excited. I drove up to the land in 2015 in the spring, and the bluebells were all starting coming up, and I was like, yes, this is great. And then they flowered, and it was a bit of a disappointment because I suddenly realised that we'd been sent the wrong batch. So we had been sent bluebells, but they weren't English bluebells. They were a hybridised version. So I was absolutely gutted because the whole point of our land and this conservation is to increase the biodiversity of both British plants and British creatures. So the fact that we didn't have English bluebells was gutting. So anyway, we've started again this year. So 2016, we've planted 200 bluebells. I've got them from another source, a reputable source. I'm hoping that they are going to be what they say on the tin, and we'll find out next spring what happens. In terms of the hybridised, bluebells seed themselves and spread very quickly and very easily, so trying to dig up all those hybridised bulbs is just not achievable. So instead what we're going to do is when we come up and we see the flowers of the hybrids, we're just going to take them off so they don't get a chance to cross-pollinate and set seed. And then if any do, if we miss any, they'll probably only cross-pollinate with the English bluebells, which will be the majority, so hopefully we can shift the entire woodland back to a bluebell grove. So that's another way of making a new conservation patch on the land, a new habitat, and some early nectar as well for the bees and things coming out. The third thing we've done is our nesting box project. Again, we crowdfunded a campaign for this, and actually I was really happy. We met the target of £500. It's now in demand, so we can keep taking money, and the more money we get, the more our boxes we can put up. So we've put one our box up already. There's a video on YouTube of us doing that. I didn't fall out of a tree, which was quite lucky. I did get very frustrated because again we're only working with the tools that we have, and it was just a crappy, cheap drill which was really not up to the task. But I managed it just before the battery ran out, thank God. And then in 2017, the beginning of 2017, we'll put up the next 4 nest boxes that we got from the crowdfunding campaign. So far there are no chicks in the boxes, but we know there are tawny owls there, we've heard them, we know there are barn owls there, we've seen them and we've heard them. So it's only a matter of time, I hope, before we get chicks. And the great thing with this crowdfunding campaign, and the fact that loads of people have got involved, is that once the box is up, we're hoping we'll get chicks, and then we can take pictures, and we can get a local society to come in and ring the chicks, and then we can have competitions to name them, and we can keep track of their rings. And it's really important to increase the bird of prey population, but particularly barn owls, because they are endangered. And you might not think it, but a hell of a lot of barn owls get killed by the roads. And that's because they fledge, and the fledglings end up landing by roads. And also, if you think when you're driving along, you often see birds of prey at the edges of the road searching for mice and things because they're in the verges. Well, unfortunately, when your bird of prey lands to pick up that prey or try and swoop and catch that prey, they get hit by cars and lorries and things. So it's really important to try and boost the population. So I'm really excited about where this owl box campaign will go. And then once we've got as many boxes up for owls as we can, we'll start moving on to things like bat boxes and bird boxes. And though we've probably got loads of breeding pairs of birds around the farm already, if they nest in our boxes, it gives us a better idea of what's actually breeding and what's actually doing well. So we can add that to our species biodiversity list, which is the fourth thing we've been doing. So every time I go to the farm, I love wildlife, suds off taking pictures, and I'm nose down in the mud looking at wildlife and bugs and trying to work out what's there. So every time we go up, we take a note of all the stuff that we see, and we're building up this list of creatures. And we're noting down dates, and if we know they're breeding, like the buzzards, for example, we note that down as well. So I hope over the coming years we can actually have a real indicator of whether our efforts in conservation and this biodiversity, increasing the biodiversity, we can see whether it's working by looking back at the data to see whether we've increased the species, the number of individual species that we're seeing, whether we're attracting breeding pairs of birds or insects and that sort of thing. So they're the main things that we've done so far, but we've got a hell of a lot of projects to come. So in 2017, obviously, we're going to be continuing the projects that we've already begun. So though the Bluebell Grove probably won't need a lot of work, the Wildflower Meadow will continuously need scything every year. And it's a 3-acre field that we're trying to cover. And at the moment, we've only covered very little of it. So we need to keep scything off all the weeds and things so the new Wildflower Meadow, the wildflowers can come up, they can seed, they can disperse their seed, and they can keep growing. And then with the owl boxes, we need to keep putting the owl boxes up, and then we need to monitor the owl pairs, whether they're nesting, and if they are, get a local organisation to come in that are allowed to handle owls, and so they can count the chicks, weigh the chicks, bring the chicks, and that sort of thing. And then we can update the campaign, and hopefully we'll get some chicks. I'm really excited. Fingers crossed for 2017 owlets. But there's loads of other projects to do as well. So we want to, in the pit has got completely out of control. And there's a hell of a lot of sycamore trees and saplings that are cutting all the light out from the floor. So we want to start coppicing and taking down some of those trees so we can get an increased diversity of flora and fungi and things like that on the forest floor, which will then benefit the biodiversity of the creatures as well. We also need to start doing some hedge laying, because our hedges are probably supposed to be, 8 to 10 foot tall. They are 5-6 meters tall, full of mature trees, which is no bad thing, but the actual hedges need bringing down, and they also need bringing in, because there's a ditch down the middle, and they probably originally were only 1 metre or 2 across, but now you're looking at 5 or 6 metres wide, so they need compacting. I mentioned a couple of ponds, and they need some serious work, because what's happened is they probably haven't been touched for 20 years, so they need dredging. And for the dredging work, we'll have to run a crowdfunding campaign to get some money, to get some machinery in, because we can't do that by hand. But what we can do is actually cut all the growth around the edges, because at the moment they are just surrounded by brambles and blackthorn and thickets. And that's really bad because obviously as it grows up, it doesn't allow light into the pond, and also when they shed their leaves in the autumn, all those leaves go straight into the pond, they add to the sludge level, and so you don't have a proper working ecosystem in your pond, you just have a horrible, muddy, filthy layer that sucks all the oxygen out. So that's another major project that I want to start undertaking in 2017. And then the other stuff is just management. So there's a lot of brambles that need cutting back, and there's paths that need scything. We want to start putting some more trees into the Wildflower Meadow. So the Wildflower Meadow will be in a portion of the field, and then we have a woodland that's not on our property but comes round. So I want to put trees on this side, just kind of bring a bit of that woodland onto our land, so we can increase that as well. So I want to be doing that. Now, that would be perfect for the autumn, because tree planting is perfect for the autumn. So again, we'll probably do another crowdfunding campaign for that. So there's loads of work to come. I'm really excited about this land and what we can do with it and how we can increase the biodiversity, and I can keep all you guys up to date with what is going on. So I hope you've liked the video. I know it's been a bit long and it's been a bit rambling, but maybe it's shown you just what we're trying to do on, you know, limited budget, just with our own time, our own effort, just hand tools, you know, scythes, rakes, chainsaw, like a hand chainsaw. So we're trying to do as much as we can, and I hope it's shown you that you can do the same. You don't need to have big budgets to do stuff, and you can do this sort of stuff in your own garden as well. You don't need a 3-acre field to make a wildflower meadow. You can do a little wildflower meadow in your own patch. Now, everything we do as individuals can help conservation and can help Mother Earth. So I will see you next week for another regular video just before Christmas. And if you've got any comments on any of the things I've talked about, any of the projects that we're doing, or maybe you've got ideas for other projects we could do, then just let me know in the comments, because it's something that's really close to my heart. I'm completely nerdy when it comes to wildlife. I just want to see as many things and creatures and bugs as I can on our land. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking. So I'll see you next time. Bye guys.